Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, government has finally classified foodborne illnesses that have led to the deaths of over 21 children, a national disaster. While this move has been largely welcomed, the question still remains, what took them so long? The Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Velenkosini Hlabisa, faces the nation tonight. Also on the show, the International Criminal Court has issued a warrant of arrest against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But what does it actually mean practically? His government has since responded to this development, describing the warrants of arrest as anti-Semitic. Dr. Navi Pillay, who is a former judge in the International Criminal Court, will speak to us tonight. We'll also speak to the South African Human Rights Commission about their legal proceedings against former DA MP Renaldo Gouws, who was suspended from the party for allegedly spewing racist slurs. He must now pay 100,000 rand and apologize to South Africans. And then later, the MK party is turning 1 next month. The organization is planning to celebrate. So how are they reflecting on the party and what's happened 1 year later? They'll speak to us before we wrap up the show. But first, my comment. So government has finally classified foodborne illnesses in the country a national disaster. There was a briefing earlier today by various ministers, including ministers of health, justice, small business development, agriculture, and other ministries. The decision by government comes after over 22 children died in our communities due to suspected food contamination. I said finally, because this decision is being made after a while. And that finally being the operative word, because a lot of us have been calling for this for weeks now. Even before the number of children who had died under these circumstances climbed to over 15, you could already see that this was becoming a concern, and yet government then still didn't think it was time to respond with urgency. And I remember on the 1st of October on this show, I did a comment about this issue and spoke about the tweets and voice notes that you sent as well when we were having a discussion about this, because the health department at the time had just told us that at least 10 kids had died between February and September this year. And I was asking, how is that normal? How is it that not a sign? How is it that this was not even a sign of a crisis? So government officials seemingly didn't have a plan, but to rush to the scene and do interviews and offer condolences to the families and promise action and go back to their comfortable homes until the next time when more children die and the cycle just repeats itself. They rush to the scene, do interviews, offer condolences to the families and promise action, go back to their comfortable homes. We were asking then, what is it going to take for government to realize this has been a crisis? And it's a crisis that requires urgency and emergency plans to stop the deaths of these children. That was on the 1st of October. Here we are now, on the 21st of November, 22 children or so have died under similar circumstances. And government has now classified this as a national disaster. So finally, the deaths of children in our communities are being treated as a crisis and an emergency that they are. A crisis and an emergency that they have been for a while now. The president announced a plan last week that is already unfolding to register and regulate spaza shops and protect communities from contaminated food. Prior to that, the Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi also announced his multifaceted plan. So we should acknowledge these recent actions by government, but we should state that government needs to do better to show care and a sense of urgency, especially when the most vulnerable in our society, children, are dying under the same circumstances. Government didn't have to wait for the 22nd or the 23rd child to die to announce a comprehensive plan or classify a national disaster. But as they say, better late than never, right? Here's the Justice Minister, Thembin Kadimeng, earlier today, announcing what this classification actually means.
Lawful joint inspections, as you would have seen, covered widely in the media, and are ongoing across the country, led by the multidisciplinary teams comprising of experts and officials from various government departments, state bodies, and law enforcement agencies. And these inspections include the food value chain from manufacturing, wholesale, transport, and the retail sector to monitor and enforce norms and standards for food safety. Not only spaza shop, the whole entire value chain.
Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen says his department will conduct inspections of Turbifos.
In terms of Turbifos, there are 6 licenses granted in South Africa for the manufacture and distribution of it. Only 5 of those are active. They are all under strict supervision and strict licensing obligations and strict supply chain management conditions. The Department of Agriculture has inspectors in each of the 9 provinces that conduct inspections on the supply chain from shops and agricultural co-ops that are authorized to sell it to make sure that it is being properly sold and distributed to the right people.
The Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, also had this to say.
The Department of Agriculture is going to follow up on the 5 manufacturers of Turbifos to see through their processes where a leak could have happened such that Turbifos gets into a community, whereas it was supposed to stay only in agriculture, in the fields. So that's one of the things that is still going to happen. On the issue of whether shops who are implicated will be closed down, as the President has said, when he said shops that are implicated, it means legally we must be able to tie that shop to a particular death.
And lastly, the Small Business Development Minister cautioned against only singling out spaza shops.
Mine is to just put emphasis on the points that the Minister of Cooperative has responded to, but also urge our media to also pay attention to all the value chain of the food handling entities. Because our focus shouldn't only be looking at the spaza shops. Minister Simelane explained the rationale behind the President's message of saying, if we are saying these foodborne deaths or diseases are because of a chemical, it therefore means that we need everybody to come on board.
We need government to do better than this next time. We need government to improve its response times to emergencies like this, to care more about the lives of its citizens, especially children. What do you think of this intervention by government now? It's obviously not too late. Some lives will be saved. But how do you assess the way government has handled this crisis so far? This is a disaster that is now classified as a disaster after 21 kids have died. Let us know your thoughts on WhatsApp. You can send us that WhatsApp voice note on 078 459 1897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you're sending that voice note from, and please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. All right, let's get straight to this story and bring in the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Velenkosini Hlabisa, who joins us now via Zoom. Minister, thank you for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening, Clement, and the viewers of this program, Face the Nation.
So the announcement earlier today was that you have classified this as a state of disaster. The consideration is to declare it a state of disaster. Just help us understand what that process entails and what it means.
And thank you very much, Clement. I do want in the forefront to say that we convey our condolences as the President did. It is unfortunate we had to lose our children. To go straight to your question, the difference between the classification and declaration. Classification is when you categorize that the illness, is it only locally based or is in one province or in more than one province. If it is in one province, you classify it that it is an illness which is provincial because it is in one province. If it is in many provinces, you classify it as a national illness because it is in more than one province. We have done that. We are working now on regulations for declaration. A difference, when you make a declaration, you declare that this is a national disaster. It needs an extraordinary response. Classification allows you to activate all departments to come on board, give support, save people, do all what is necessary. But if it goes beyond ordinary response, like you need soldiers to be on the ground, you need facilities to house people, you need an extraordinary steps, then you make a declaration. It brings a lot of activity and also some limitations which you can do under classification, but when you need something extra, as I make an example, mobilizing soldiers to be on the streets, you need to declare.
Okay. How many cases have been reported so far and how many children have died so far according to the latest numbers that you have as government?
I could safely say 26, because on record we have been having 25 and we know of another instance as of yesterday which marks 26. But we have gone a step further, Clement, that any death of a child from 12 years to younger must be reported to the central point so that the cause of death will be known. And this has not been the case before. As you will know, Clement, when one person dies, a death certificate is issued at a Home Affairs, but there is no central point where this is being reported as well as the cause of death. We have now gone a step further that any younger child from 12 years and below must be reported at a central point and be followed. What was the cause of death? So that we can follow whether is it part of food poisoning or an ordinary death.
Yeah, and this is going to help a great deal because it helps us understand what could be the driving force here. But Minister, why is this consideration for a state of disaster only being made now? Had this been classified and maybe even declared earlier, some lives would have probably been spared.
Clement, the truth of the matter, we started with the gazetting of the standard bylaws. When you deal with a country, you need to move from a certain base, because if you don't do so, some people will take you to court and you will lose the whole exercise when you go to the court of law. Having done the standard bylaws and having moved to the classification, in order to classify, you must get certain information which can be tested, that in case anyone challenges you when you use that information. The classification is what allows us to do the inspections. We had to test the regulations of the classification should anyone challenges it, taking into account the previous experiences. That is why now we are working towards declaration, because it's an extraordinary step that you must take. Some people will challenge you because it will stop this spread of the foodborne illness decisively. That is why you need to do due diligence in order not to lose the case when someone challenges you in the court of law.
But the processes could have still started much earlier. By the time you gazetted those bylaws, there were about 18 or 20 children that had died already. The process could have still started much earlier. We already were seeing children dying under similar circumstances from different parts of the country. That was already alarming by the time the number was reaching 8 or 10.
Clement, let us agree. You know, illness in most cases catches you unprepared, because no one prepares for a particular illness, especially this one, because you will never know where is this coming from, because the chemical is even sold in taxi ranks, is spread throughout the country, up until you locate that for these children, this is where the problem might be emanating from. But even now, we know this chemical is all over the country. That is why we are making a fast move to make a declaration so that we arrest it once and for all, because we don't know where it is. But the report says this is sold in the taxi rank. People buy it in order to deal with rats in their various communities. And unfortunately, it resulted to what was not intended from the original point of view.
What lessons have you learned as government from how you have responded in this, with this crisis and the timing of your response?
We must tighten our systems, and we must go a step further. Out of this instance, we learned a lot from COVID-19, and we are learning a lot from this instance emanating from how our businesses in villages and township and rural communities are controlled. I must agree, Clement, we have all been witnesses that the businesses, spaza shop, and all other informal businesses in villages, townships, and rural communities are not in a good state. People sleep there, and we never took an action timeously. That is one of the lessons we must have learned, that anything we see, that it is not ordinary. Before it becomes a disaster, we must take a step against.
Yeah. There have been some frustrations from some spaza shop owners about how laborious the process of registration is. How are you intervening in that regard? And also on the shortage of environmental health inspectors, how are you helping municipalities with capacitating them, all these districts and metropolitan municipalities, so that they can effectively enforce inspections across the country?
In the action plan, we are approaching the National Treasury to make available money to employ 10 environmental health inspectors per each district out of 52 districts in South Africa. That will bring a great change, and they will be supported by other health inspectors from other sectors. These 10 times 52 districts will be deployed at a municipal level, but other sectors of our country will be on board in assisting. Traffic officers, police, health inspectors from Home Affairs, and we think we will have sufficient manpower, but also ordinary citizens must be part of bringing to the attention of the government when they see something is not going well in a particular outlet, either it's a spaza shop or a wholesale, when they see it's a foreign national whom is operating in an outlet that is registered for a person of South Africa. Because I just want to clarify one thing, Clement. The spaza shop must be operated by a person who applied for a license. Hlabisa cannot apply for a license and then allow a foreign national to operate that outlet. If Hlabisa wants to hand over the license to someone else, that process must go through the municipality so that whoever operates a business should be a documented person in South Africa.
Yeah. This process you're talking about of approaching Treasury to make some funds available so you can capacitate municipalities with more health inspectors, how long is that going to take? Because we're dealing here with an urgent situation. This crisis is moving really, really too fast. And we know how long processes in government can take. How long do you expect this will take?
This plan is going to be tabled before Cabinet tomorrow on Friday, where the national minister will be present. Once the Cabinet approves, the Minister of Finance will have to play around and make the money available.
All right. Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister Velenkosini Hlabisa, really appreciate your time on Face the Nation tonight. After the break, we'll speak to a former judge at the International Criminal Court, Dr. Navi Pillay, because Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has had a warrant of arrest issued by the ICC against him. But practically speaking, what does it actually mean? That's a conversation after the break. Stay with us here on Face the Nation. Welcome back. South Africa has welcomed the International Criminal Court's recent warrant of arrest for top Israeli and Hamas officials. Judges at the Hague-based court have issued warrants of arrest for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the former Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant, and Hamas military leader Mohammed Diab Ibrahim Al-Masri for alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. Dr. Navi Pillay is a former judge at the International Criminal Court who joins us now via Zoom. Dr. Navi Pillay, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening. It's a great pleasure. Good evening to you, Clement, and to viewers.
Yeah. So this warrant of arrest has now been issued. But the question is, what happens next? Does the ICC have a case here? Because the indictment means that there will be a trial if the arrests are actually made.
Well, that's a big question. The expectation is that states, particularly those who have signed the Rome Statute, will arrest him or arrest all these accused persons if they are found on their territories, just like South Africa was obliged to arrest the former leader of Sudan, remember? This particular prosecutor would never have gone ahead with these indictments if he had not seriously investigated these charges. He didn't get everything that he had requested. The court limited him, for instance, on intentional direct attacks. The court said they were only convinced in respect of 2 incidents. However, it's wide open there for Israel to challenge these, intervene. For instance, they could have by now asked for the ICC to defer the proceedings to allow them to investigate nationally. That would have been the proper procedure, because the ICC only intervenes when the state concerned is unable or unwilling to investigate. So that opportunity was open to them, still is. There'll be many procedures before this actually comes to trial.
Yeah. Practically speaking, what does it mean for especially Benjamin Netanyahu? Yes, there are these 120 countries around the world, including the UK and many other European countries that are signatory to the Rome Statute. what Benjamin Netanyahu could do is just avoid going to those places. So politically speaking and practically speaking, what does this actually mean for him?
Well, you are quite right. The ICC can only function if we have the cooperation of states, states who have the power and the ability to arrest a person who's charged, should fulfill those obligations whether they signed up to the Rome Statute or not, because all states agree to the principle of accountability. They agree to the principle of international justice and compliance with international law. So what's going to happen, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. I mean, this is, though, a dramatic escalation of legal proceedings over Israel's offensive in Gaza, isn't it? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, marks the first time that the court has actually issued a warrant for a Western-backed leader, which is quite a significant moment. Because, as you know, there's always been criticism that the ICC targets African leaders.
You know, and there's been some justification for that criticism, that the ICC was targeting African leaders alone, even though 5 African countries, including Uganda, asked the ICC to intervene. But when you look at the numbers, yes, they seem to have been focusing just on Africa. But this investigation into Palestine was started a long time ago by the former prosecutor from the Gambia, Fatou Bensouda. I think that the complaint was lodged by Palestine against Israel in 2018. So it's a long-standing investigation that this prosecutor has now brought to fruition. The courts, you know, the judges and so on, they will proceed with what they have to do. It's not a situation, even in our own country, our police don't sit and wait to have a warrant issued just on the suspicion that nobody will arrest the person or the person will run away. Justice will take its course. Yeah. It may take time, yes. This is a very important indictment. It's against a head of government. You are right, the first in a Western democracy, although Israel is truly not a democracy when half the population are not allowed to participate in government. Nevertheless, the West calls Israel a democracy, and this is a first for a Western leader. The beauty of it is that the International Criminal Court is independent. They don't have biases, pro-Western, anti-African. And I think this warrant authorized by the court, the pretrial chamber, now sends that signal. That's an independent court. The prosecutor has investigated these crimes of his own accord independently in fulfillment of his job. You know, you haven't asked me, but we responded to the request of the prosecutor to share the information we have, because we, meaning the United Nations Commission of Inquiry of Palestine and Israel, which was set up by the Human Rights Council and of which I'm the chair, we have the mandate to conduct investigation, safeguard evidence, and whoever requests us for this information, we will share that, because it is for purposes of judicial proceedings.
Yeah. What do you make of the response from Israel? Benjamin Netanyahu's office said the warrants against him and Gallant were, in a quote here, anti-Semitic, and that Israel rejects with disgust and absurd and false these accusations and allegations. I mean, I'm sure you didn't expect anything less. You look at the ICJ judgments that have come out and what the consistent response has always been from Israel, and here they are now calling these warrants of arrest actions of anti-Semitism.
That is their usual response. They have to look at the substance of the allegations in these indictments and take them seriously. They said the same thing to my commission of inquiry and to me, that we are anti-Semitic, we are biased, but they didn't challenge the facts that we investigated and put out there. You know, when you investigate something, you want to know, well, where have I gone wrong or need more evidence? So they called everybody, including the Secretary General of the United Nations Human Rights Council. They call all of us anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is a serious matter. It should not be used so loosely on anybody who has evidence and is critical of Israel's actions. I think it's a very serious matter and will be taken seriously inside Israel when the head of the government is now facing these very serious charges.
Yeah. All eyes now are on the world leaders and how they will be responding to this crucial development. And I mean, we can start with the US, which is Israel's biggest ally, which is not a signatory to the ICC. I mean, there's no guessing how Washington will be responding to this development.
I sometimes feel that the politicians inside US have no idea how the international mechanisms work. For instance, the Republicans politicians in the US Congress said that the Pillay Commission has to be disbanded and they will deny us funds because we are anti-Semitic. Similar threats against various other UN bodies. You can't do that. This is an independent court in this case that has issued this indictment. It won't just go away. And let me say, the same applies to the provisional measures that South Africa secured under the Genocide Convention, which many see as a wonderful humanitarian step that South Africa took to intervene. And we ourselves succeeded in persuading the General Assembly to get the ICJ opinion, because we said the root cause of the conflict is the occupation. So for 60 years, that had not been done. So now you are right, there is a resurgence of resorting to the law rather than to force and military might.
Mm-hmm. While it's so clear that the US may very well back Benjamin Netanyahu on this, other world leaders may respond differently. I mean, as the war on Gaza has continued, we've seen how, I mean, the leader in France, some of the leaders in the UK were now changing their messaging, saying, yes, we respect and support your right to defend yourself, but you also have to be cautious how you respond. They were complaining about civilians' deaths. In this development now, I saw that Downing Street refused to directly confirm, saying whether or not they will be effecting this warrant of arrest, saying that they only, and I quote here, we respect the court's independence. Is that response telling us anything about what the position of the UK may be in this?
You know, you are quite right to focus on that. There has been a change, and there is a change. And I believe that change began to come about when the International Court of Justice, almost unanimously, save for one dissent, said that the occupation is unlawful. It must be rapidly dismantled, and reparation must be made to the Palestinian settlers, must be removed. This is a very dramatic judgment. And since it's their court, it's the court, the ICJ is the court for member states. Very few states will oppose or criticize a decision from their court, the ICJ. I think there's been a good move as a result of the ICJ legal opinion that Palestine moved a matter before the UN General Assembly. This happened late last month or early this month, where 124 countries, I believe, in the General Assembly supported the implementation of the ICJ decision, and that they will support an end to the occupation. Now, these are all dramatic events, not resulting from protracted 60 years of negotiation, and not resulting from all this military might, but from the fact that states and civil society the world over are no longer prepared to sit and watch this level of violent retaliation to the October 7th attacks.
Mm-hmm. Something else that was confusing for other people is the ICC's issuing of a warrant of arrest for one of the Hamas leaders, Mohammed Diab, for crimes against humanity for what happened on October 7. But then Israel had said in August that it killed Diab in an airstrike in Gaza a month earlier.
Well, I think the prosecutor, Karim Khan, had originally intended to or applied for warrants against 3 members of Hamas. And he says he's now established that 2 of them have been killed or assassinated, but that he at this point was unable to verify whether Mr. Diab is alive or not, and therefore is proceeding with this warrant of arrest against Mohammed Diab.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Navi Pillay, for making time for us. She is the former judge at the International Criminal Court. After the break, we'll speak to the South African Human Rights Commission. Remember Renaldo Gouws, the one who was pushed out from the DA for allegedly spewing racist remarks? Well, the Human Rights Commission has published its report on that. They want him to apologize for those remarks and pay 100,000 rand fine. They'll speak to us after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the South African Human Rights Commission is taking the former DA MP Renaldo Gouws to the Equality Court over a viral video in which he allegedly called black people to be killed. The video was originally published in 2010 and was later deleted, but resurfaced. Gouws was a DA member of Parliament who was later removed from Parliament. For more on this, we were joined by Dr. Eileen Carter, who is the South African Human Rights Commission Eastern Cape Manager. Dr. Carter, thank you so much for making time for us on Face the Nation. Good evening.
Good evening, Clement, and good evening to the viewers.
Now, the video that is the subject of the Equality Court complaint is over a decade old. Why do you believe the matter must still be pursued and constitutes hate speech?
I think we are very clear as the Human Rights Commission that the K word and the N word would automatically constitute hate speech. The jurisprudence is clear in that respect. Even as early as 2000, when the Equality Act was drafted by the legislature, they in fact included the K word expressly as an example of hate speech. So this is back 25 years ago almost. So it's a recognized epithet, and it's explicit racial slurs, and it's universally recognized as hate speech. So they carry a long history of oppression and dehumanization. And we are very clear that their use in any context reinforces the very harm they represent. So that is why we have instituted this matter in respect of the Equality Act and Section 10 specifically in terms of hate speech, but also we are arguing this constitutes harassment and unfair discrimination. We hear you in terms of the issue. The video was first issued in 2010, but as they say, the internet never forgets.
Yeah, indeed it doesn't. What are you seeking as the South African Human Rights Commission from the Equality Court?
So what we're asking in the papers that are now publicly available at the Equality Court is that the respondent must apologize for making use of these racially inflammatory words, and we're asking for damages to be paid to an organization, and we are also asking for community service. We deem hate speech in this country as really a matter that we need to address head on. We need to, dismiss any assertion that it was done under the auspices of artistic freedom. We can't see the rationality in that respect. So hyperbole, or whatever the wording was used, trivializes the lived experiences of those who have been targeted by such language, and that is exactly our point.
How did his legal team explain those remarks that he made? How did they justify them?
So, Clement, we are still in what we would call a pre-trial phase now. We held the directions hearing this morning in Gqeberha, and what that basically entailed is we wanted to set out the process going for. Mr. Gouws' attorneys initially wanted to separate the merits from the process, arguing points in limine, but the Commission was clear in our position in that respect, and the court agreed that the matter will be heard as a whole, and the matter was then deferred to May for the matter to be heard, both points in limine as well as the matter on merit.
But from what we've heard from him before on other social media platforms, you mentioned hyperbole and how that was used to explain some of the remarks. As the Human Rights Commission, what do you make of the initial responses is made to try and explain that recording?
So we maintain our position. It is clear in our affidavits as well that the words uttered constitute hate speech, harassment and unfair discrimination. The reasons, therefore, we will argue on the merits when we go to court in May. But at this point, our affidavits and our submissions to the court is very clear. We do not see the what might be seen as defenses of artistic freedom and hyperbole being seen as a proper defense in the use of these inflammatory languages, even if it was done in 2010. The hurt and the harm, specifically the harm, would still be continuing, as was very clear from the complaints that we received from members of the public.
Yeah, and just lastly, the acting judge, Olaf Runessen, has postponed the matter now for trial until May 2025. His legal team initially argued that there had been an undue delay in bringing a case against him. Is that valid?
Well, that's certainly their argument, and that's the argument they're going to provide to the court as well in May. They would be arguing that the matter is old. The Commission is ready for the argument as well, and that we will be making clear in May as well.
All right. Thank you so much for making time for us. That is Dr. Elian Carter, who is the South African Human Rights Commission Eastern Cape Manager. Now, we've been asking you a question this evening about government's interventions. They've now classified what's happening in our communities with children dying due to contaminated food a state of disaster. What is your assessment of government's classification of these foodborne illnesses as a national disaster? Let's find out from you through some tweets that have come through so far. We've got some tweets that have come and some voice notes. Let's start with your tweets. Vusi says, the response by government came in very late. So many young souls have been lost, and this reactive behavior is upsetting. This should have been long declared a state of disaster. Melikaya says it's a welcome progress, but they are very indecisive and slow. They enjoy offering condolences and paying for the funerals because they benefit. Thank you so much for your tweets. Let's also hear through the voice note line what some of you have had to say.
Sibonelo Tumujobela Hlabisa Mnumzane KZN. I think this is a treason. Whoever is responsible for this mass account, including our government officials. I think this is too much. It's too late. It's too late already. Many lives have been lost. Thank you.
Good evening, Clement. Is speaking to Ryzen Goveni from Limpopo province at Gallant village. To my opinion, I can't say the government takes time to put it on a state disaster. It's just because you need to focus, you need to check what is going on, because it was not a poison for one province, it was the poison for all the provinces that was happening. So since the government speak, he says all the shops must close. That dying of the children, it stop. Thank you, Clement.
All right, thank you so much for your WhatsApp voice notes and some tweets. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the MK Party and the celebration of a year since its formation. They're going to be celebrating that on the 16th of December. Stay with us here on Face the Nation. Welcome back. As we've been telling you, the MK Party will be celebrating its first year anniversary on the 16th of December. The national spokesperson is Nhlamulo Ndlela, who joins us now. Nhlamulo, thank you for making time for us, and congratulations as the MK Party for your 1-year anniversary that you'll be celebrating next month. What are your reflections on the past year as a party?
Thank you, Clement. I think let me start by saying that President Zuma and MK Party send their condolences to the families of the kids that have died in the hands of negligent government officials. And again, naturally, we know the constitutional delinquent of a president is not going to do much, as you've seen. And it's sad that, our kids are dying as black children, and they're dying in the townships. And this government continues to just do nothing. So I just wanted to ensure that we touch on that and we surface this as not just a foodborne illness. These are deaths of children. These are foodborne deaths.
Yeah. Did you say Jacob Zuma's MK Party?
I said President Jacob Zuma and
okay. Got it.
Yes.
What is your reflection, back to my initial question, your reflection as the MK Party on the past year?
Well, look, Clement, when we announced in December 16, President Zuma said that he'd be voting for Mkhonto as his party because this ANC didn't reflect the values and didn't represent what the policies. Sorry, someone cut in now? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, I just heard someone cut in now. And it doesn't reflect a party that will liberate the people. And it was clear that people in South Africa had no other option. And with the resounding response, as you would have seen, in the elections, even though we know that they were questionable, is telling in of itself that people are tired of the status quo. They want to change. They saw Mkhonto as the alternative party that should come in to govern. And it also then confirms that President Zuma is liked by a lot of South Africans. They trust him to be a leader that will govern this country. And it's clear that, we've done extremely well. More so to highlight is that let's not forget the challenges that we were faced with. The legal battles, people trying to question the logo, trying to stop us from participating in the elections in the first place from a registration perspective. President Zuma, in terms of Section 47(1)(e), being now eliminated from participating in the National Assembly. So, but here we are with the official opposition in Parliament. We are the second largest, actually the largest political party in KZN, second largest political party in Mpumalanga, and we represented in 7 legislatures out of the 9. So clearly, that is a resounding response from South Africans, and we've done extremely well for a political party that was called a spaza shop or a gimmick.
Mm. You've managed to, over the year, attract a number of, even high-profile individuals. Floyd Shivambu being one of the latest ones to join you, Mzwanele Manyi, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhabane, and many others. And I know there's always now assumptions on who is next to join the MK Party. Are you still, looking at the approach of attracting other leaders from other parties to join the organization?
Well, I'm sure you'll have seen from our slogans to say, and that's what MK is about. MK is a political party that is focused on civil activism for South Africans that want to see change. So we don't go around poaching leaders or political parties. These are South Africans that believe MK is a home, that they believe that will be, the vehicle and the catalyst to emancipate and liberate our people. And we welcome all South Africans regardless of race and background, to participate in us liberating this country. Remember, the main aim here is for us to form a united front, and a patriotic united front of all progressive political parties and all South Africans that are progressive that want to see change. So we cannot beat the system if we're not united. And Umkhonto Wesizwe is the platform where every single political party, every single South African that is progressive, that wants to see change, and that stands for the rights of the people of this country and the downtrodden people ought to be. So this is what we represent as Umkhonto Wesizwe.
So what are your plans with celebrating? What can we expect?
Oh, well, our program is going to start in Ekurhuleni, where President Zuma is going to address the crowd there. And then we'll move to Mkhondo. Mkhondo, as you would have seen, I think the first time when we demonstrated a show of power and support was when we actually went to Mkhondo for a rally there. And it was a resounding response that we got there. So we'll be going there to celebrate with them and have a public meeting with the members and the civil society in Mkhondo. And then we'll move from Mkhondo, we will then go to the Ilembe region in KZN, where also we had a resounding response. And from there, that would then lead us to the 15th of December. We will hold the national celebration of the first anniversary of Umkhonto Wesizwe.
All right, and Tlamulo Ndlela, thank you so much for making time for us, and all the best with your celebrations. And thanks to you for watching the Thursday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back with you on Tuesday next week at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.